Well, I heard you like OLED, so you better buckle in because today we're taking a look at MSI's new MPG 271QRX, which is a 27-inch 1440p 360Hz 16:9 QD OLED V3 monitor with an alleged response time of 0.03 milliseconds, gray to gray, and yes, it does come with G-Sync and FreeSync compatibility and an HDR 400 True Black certification, as per usual. Now, in terms of the overall design, I do think that the monitor itself does look very good. It's not too gamery or gaudy, but the wires are a little bit difficult to hide. And I do want to mention that when it comes to the stand, I feel like the base is a little large for a 27-inch monitor, but it can move in any direction that you would want, and it does have standard VESA compatibility. Now, in terms of the ports, pause if you need to. Yes, it does come with two HDMI 2.1 ports, which is great because that should mean no display stream compression issues, except for, I think it's using display stream compression anyway for some reason, because it did have 3 to 4 second black screens when alt-tabbing out of full screen applications, and I was locked out of some NVIDIA settings as well, so do be aware of that. Now, in terms of the price and warranty, it does come in at $799.99, and it also comes with a 3-year warranty, which does include burn-in. So that's actually really, really good on paper. Yes, it's expensive for a 1440p display, but you're getting Quantum Dot OLED and 360Hz as well as HDR. That's a lot of really nice stuff there, and a glossy screen in one package at what I think is a pretty good price overall. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual performance to determine, is it any good or is it hot trash? Well, let's find out first, starting off with the color. My first impressions, as with any QD OLED, is it's excellent. You're gonna get super vibrant, super punchy colors out of this monitor, not only because of Quantum Dot OLED being excellent, but because of that glossy finish as well, making for an excellent image. And in terms of the actual accuracy, I do gotta say, not too bad out of the box. Of course, it is gonna be in a incorrect setting for Windows, so it's going to be stretching sRGB. So I was able to fix that pretty easily in the settings there, which, by the way, will have the best settings for this display linked in my Patreon in the description below, which also does help the channel for future reviews as well. So thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. But moving on to the color checker analysis, I gotta say, I was impressed. Overall, pretty dang good. An average delta E of just 1.2. As you can see, all the colors are pretty close, but I did find that the white balance was a little bit off, and that did lead to some slight inaccuracies here, although I was told that the MPG models should hopefully be getting proper white balance control for sRGB as well as HDR pretty soon, so that'll be great. Speaking of HDR, well, out of the box, not too bad actually. And in fact, you're probably better off leaving it in the user setting out of the box, as the color checker analysis was also not too bad, but there definitely were some other colors here that were a lot more off than sRGB. So I think they could improve it there. Now, in terms of the actual color volume, we're talking 108% DCI-P3, which is definitely enough to give you those vibrant colors that you need for an HDR image, and is some of the best I've seen on QD OLED monitors thus far. Now, moving on to the brightness, this is one of the most important metrics for an HDR monitor, and here I gotta say it is actually pretty dang good for desktop usage. However, I just don't think it's bright enough for impactful HDR movies or gaming. Don't get me wrong, HDR is definitely worth enabling here, but I think they could do better with future generations. As taking a look here, well, we can see that a mini LED monitor is just stomping all over this thing, and it is technically the lowest brightness 1440p display I've measured so far in a 100% and 10% window, coming in at 278 nits on the 100% and 471 on a 10%, but it's gonna be right there with every single other QD OLED. I think you will be pretty satisfied overall. I just think they could improve it for HDR. Now, speaking of HDR, taking a look at an HDR game, it does get a little bit better in the charts, but overall, again, not super impressive. And this is just against a bunch of other OLED monitors. If we were to throw in an OLED TV, it would absolutely slam dunk on this thing, and a mini LED would have the same effect. So hopefully the next generation can get brighter. But moving on to shadow detail, here you can see that both in SDR as well as HDR, it's pretty good. It is crushing some shadows a little bit more in HDR, but I think overall it is pretty acceptable there. But now we got to talk about gaming, because that's the main reason you would buy this monitor, to get that super fast 360Hz refresh rate. And I gotta say, guys, 360Hz OLED, my first impressions were wow. It's just a really great experience. It feels super fast. All of the motion just looks really, really clean, and there's just nothing else out there that can give you that level of speed that we're getting out of 360Hz OLED. To put that into perspective here, we can see that in terms of latency, it is going to be one of the fastest monitors that I've tested thus far. Of course, there is room for 1 millisecond error here, but do expect this to be extremely lightning fast. Very, very usable for online gaming, some of the best out there. And in terms of the motion performance, here you can see that at 360Hz, it is a little bit better than 240Hz. Now, the funny thing here that I found is that 480Hz seems to be where you cross over into that super, super good motion performance, but 360Hz is certainly getting close. Definitely better than 240, but it's not way better. So if you're on 240Hz right now, it might be worth waiting for 480Hz if you want that next step up and you want to feel very substantial. But of course, 360Hz is better. And if you're someone who's trying to play competitively, it's gonna potentially give you that small advantage. Now, in terms of the features, it does come with KVM picture-in-picture / picture-by-picture, 90-watt Type-C power delivery, and I think most importantly for a lot of people is you can actually shrink the screen down to 24.5 inches, as well as 4:3 for compatibility with older games, as well as if you want to set a lower resolution and get the same pixel density for higher performance. I think a lot of people will find that very useful. Now, in terms of the text clarity and sub-pixel layout, I gotta say, honestly, I don't think it's very good. Now, I think your mileage will vary here for sure. I think some people will definitely not be bothered by this whatsoever. However, it does bother me at 1440p. The 4K QD OLEDs don't really bother me too much. I can notice the fringing, the chromatic aberration on the edges of text, but it's far more noticeable at 1440p, necessitating a much larger text scale to try and hide it. So this, I think it will be annoying to some. I've heard some people even complain about headaches on 1440p QD OLED. I don't know how many people are really being affected by that, but do keep in mind the text clarity is not gonna be as good on this 1440p resolution as it would be at 4K due to the triangle layout that they're using. Hopefully they can move to a regular red, green, blue layout in the future, but this is what we got for now. Now, in terms of the viewing angles and uniformity, it's nearly perfect. So let's go ahead and move on to the menu in the firmware, which was excellent, by the way, super fast, super clean, looks great. And finally, the G-Sync flickering. Yes, there was some VRR flickering in dark areas if you have an unstable frame rate, much like basically any OLED out there. It wasn't necessarily any worse or better than any that I've tested so far. So if you are going to use VRR and you're going to be in a dark scene, try and cap your frame rate to something you can sustain. So overall, what do I think about this monitor? Is it worth $750, a pretty high price tag for 1440p display? And I think the answer is yes. This is a pretty dang good monitor overall. I really like it. The 360Hz motion clarity and speed that you get out of this with it being OLED, as well as the per pixel local dimming for excellent nighttime HDR scenes, makes this just an incredibly fast, smooth feeling monitor that is also capable of giving you a very good image in a dark area. Now, I say a dark area because while the glossy screen on here is very, very good, unfortunately, QD OLED itself suffers from magenta tinting or a gray look to the image if you put it in a bright environment. So do be aware you have to be in a dark, light-controlled room to get the most contrast and vibrancy out of this display. If you can't do that, you will be throwing some of the image quality out the window. But overall, again, I think it's super good. I think a lot of, especially online gamers, are gonna love a monitor like this. It's one of the most aggressively priced ones on the market. It's getting some great firmware updates I've been hearing in the coming months here as well, making it a really good option. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10, certified recommended. By the way, 7 is very good. I know some people like to rate things only 8 to 10. I don't do that. That's far above average. That's a great recommendation, and I will have an affiliate link in the description below if you want to pick one up.